Hi, everybody. We're ready for another art lesson. Aren't you glad? Today, we are going to work on weaving, which is a little bit of a process. We're going to cover several subjects that I think are on your curriculum. Those include the primary colors, organic shapes, and texture. And there might be some other ones in there that I just don't remember. We're going to need kind of a lot of things for this. It's not real complicated, but we do need some different things. So first of all, you're going to need a branch that's nice and straight. This one's got, you can't really see the branch really well because the leaves are all kind of crinkled up, but here you can see it a little bit better, the part that I've taken the leaves off already. You'll need to just pull off those leaves, but I'll get into that a little bit in a little bit. You will need scissors. You might need a pruning shears, but that's optional. You'll need a couple of different kinds of yarn. So we'll do that. This is for, in weaving, there are called, what are called the warp threads and the weft threads. These are for the warp threads. You don't have to use a thinner yarn, but it seems like it'll depend, your weaving will change depending on the kind of yarn you use. So we can try different things just for different textures. I also have, and we'll need a craft stick, one of the wide ones, and that will be for the shuttle. You might want to use one of these kind of combs. That's not necessarily necessary, it's optional too. Also, you will probably need a tapestry needle. And then I just have a little sample of weaving that I've already done to show you some of the other materials you could possibly use. If you look right here, I've woven little twigs right into that. And then this is some fluffy kind of yarn, and the rest is just regular. A lot of the red is just regular yarn, and this part down here is just regular yarn. So you can use a lot of different things. And you can see that this was done just I had stretched it out on a twig here and then another twig here, and I had them stretched so I could weave, and then I cut these off and left them and tied them up and left them as fringe. With the project we're doing today, we won't need to do that. So we're going to go through this step by step. Take all this stuff away again. We're going to leave the pruning shears just in case. But I'm taking what I'm going to do with this. It's basically a shoot. It's like a chokecherry tree that has a shoot that comes up from the ground. When they're young like this, they're perfect for using for this type of thing. So I'm just going to go and pull off the leaves. Now, if you have trouble pulling the leaves off, which it appears that I am having a little bit of trouble, you could probably use a scissor too, because this isn't very hard to cut. You can cut it with pruning shears like this. Cut them really short as you can get them. And then what I did with I had another branch, and I bent that over like this. I'm going to move this white paper so you can see it a little bit better. And this has already got the warp threads on it, so you can see them. But I bent this in just almost like a little fish shape. And I decided, just for the heck of it, and then you put yarn around where these two join, wrap it up really good and tie it off. And then just for fun, I just left the leaves on. I'm sure they'll eventually fall off, but for now they're good. And so going back to the other branch I have, what you want to do, you don't want to bend it all real fast. You're going to have to bend it slowly. Just take it kind of slowly and bend it around your thumb like this until it bends enough that you can form that till they'll join, which may take a little patience because you don't want to, if you do it too fast, it's going to snap the branch or the twig. But now I'm getting it looser, it's loosened up. The more you work it like that, the more it'll loosen up, and then you can, I'm going to do this end here just a little bit more, and then I think we're ready to do that. When it gets to the point at the end where it's really thick, it's hard to bend, so you don't need to do that. So just get it to the point where it will bend and you can cross over, and then you can wrap around the end. So that's how you do that. And that's what I mentioned that we were talking about organic shapes. This would be considered an organic shape, not just because it's made from a tree branch, but the shape of it is not symmetrical or anything. You can see there are variations here where it isn't a perfect curve. And that kind of makes it that. A circle or an oval or a square, something that had clean edges like that, that would be considered inorganic. But this is more of an organic shape. Anything that's a little, I shouldn't say unusual, but not real structured. So now we're ready to start weaving. And like I said, we're going to use, these are the warp threads that are already on there. Oh, and by the way, I'll explain how to do that too. You're going to be using like a ball of thread like this probably, but you obviously are going to have a hard time moving this whole thing around this. So you want to take some of that off of there and make it into a smaller, more manageable thing. What I do with something like this is I wrap it around a couple of fingers like this until I have enough on there, and then kind of squish it together so it hangs together. So I've got it like this, and then it's easier to deal with, easier to manage. And then you just tie it off on one end, wrap it around. You can see that I've wrapped it around the end several times before I tied it. Don't worry about this loose end because that'll get in right in with the weaving. Then I went down here, wrapped it around a few times, and then moved it over and wrapped it around. I didn't cut this off. I just kept going with it. Wrapped it around again and moved it up here and wrapped it around. You may have to wrap it 3 or 4 times to make sure that it's pretty stable. And you want these kind of tight, but not too tight. Because if you pull, like if you put this one on and then you pull the next one too tight, all of them are going to be, the tension on them is going to be different. And you want them to be all of the same tension so that there aren't loose ones and tight ones and loose ones, because your weaving will not look so good if you don't have nice even tension on them. Okay, so we are done with that string. So then we can go on to the other kind of yarn. There's usually a loose thread right at the end here that you can pull out. A lot of people want to pull it from here and find a thread there, and you can find a thread, but it's much harder to manage than this, because this one, you just pull it right out of there and it just comes sliding right out. At first, there's usually probably a little blob that you'll get of tangled yarns, but once you get that all straightened out, it'll pull smoothly. So then I just took a section of yarn and cut it, and I'm going to wrap it, take the end of it Just hold it down with your thumb here and then just wrap it. Don't wrap it too tight. But there again, don't wrap it too loose either. You don't want it falling off of there, but you want it just tight enough so it'll stay in place. This is not an absolute thing that you have to use. You can just use your fingers to do the weaving part. But this, I think it's, for me, it's easier to get through all the warp threads. So that's why I like to use that. So then, getting started, I'm going to just use my fingers. I'm going to lift up every other thread. And by the way, I don't think it matters if you do an odd or an even number of warp threads unless you're doing a specific kind of weaving, a specific pattern where you're alternating multiple warp threads. But I'm going to just leave that end right in the middle there. And that's something that I'm going to weave into there. I'm going to take the tapestry needle when I get done with the weaving and weave that back into that. So then we turn around, or you can leave it the same. We'll go down to the next one and alternate just the opposite of what you did. So like this right here, the yarn is going under. That means on this row, it has to go over. And then there again, you just alternate rows. So you get all the way through. Whoops. Up on one there. And you really want to watch what you're doing so that you do alternate. Because you don't want to pick up the wrong one. You pick up the wrong one, you obviously have to start over, and that's not fun. So there I've got the beginning of the weaving. And I'm going to push this up with my fingers, but you could also, if you have a comb like this, you can do this too. And then also tighten it a little bit. You can't do a lot of tightening at this point because you don't have much weaving to hold things in place. But after you get a few rows, now once again, I'll come back around here and do the opposite. So we'll go under that, under that, under this, under this. So all you have to do is remember that the one you went over the last row, you'll go under in the next row. So it's not really hard to remember. And then you can take your little thing and tap. The more of these you get in there, the easier it'll be to push those down. You can also just use your fingers too. Now, at the end, I've got a little bit of extra loop here, so I'm going to pull that down a little bit. This is at the beginning is kind of the critical part where you want to make sure everything's looping, all the tensions are right. Once you get started, it goes a lot easier. One more row of that color, at least one more. And under this one, under that one, this one. Sort of like watching paint drying, isn't it? A little bit. It's kind of fun to do though. You can see that having this shuttle probably makes it a little bit easier than if you're just pushing the yarn under each one. Snug that up a little bit. one more row of this color and then I'll just change to a different one just to show you how to use a different color. Under that one. Under that one. You can see I'm just picking up each of those with my fingers. So it kind of slides right through. Pull that snug but not tight. Be careful not to pull these too tight, because you can see how this is pulling the warp threads kind of together a little bit. So I want to make sure at the early stages that I get that pretty much squared away so it doesn't pull too much. Now, I could push all of this right up to the edge here, but I kind of want to leave at least a little bit of it, of the warp threads showing. Now, if you want to just take a piece of ribbon like this, I'm just going to take this off. And I'm going to just leave that there right now, and we'll wrap this ribbon around just to make it a little easier to get through there. On this, I think what I want to do is kind of have those tail ends just hanging down. So I'm going to just do this. You're going to alternate again. Go under this one, under this one, under this one. So you keep weaving the same. Just remember to get it under the one that it went over on the last one. So I think what I want to do on this is just pull some through and leave some hanging down. And you can either scrunch that up or leave it just like it is and go to the next one. But instead of on this, I think instead of weaving it back through, I think I just want to cut it off and leave that, just have one strip in there and leave them hanging like that. And then we'll switch to some red. Actually, on second thought, this kind of sparkly, I'm not even sure how to describe this yarn. It's textured. It's got a lot of stuff going on there. I think I want to put a row of that in along with that yellow. And I do it the same way, just run one strand. Because it's got a lot going on, so I don't really need much of it in there, and it'll just add a little sparkle to the ribbon that's already there. So you can kind of play around with different kinds of yarns like this and get a lot of different effects with that. Just pull that back until I have a little thread dangling. You can always trim these off the length you want them later too. If you decide you want them a little bit shorter or something. Then you find the end of it. I'm going to take some red. I did have the end of it at one point. This is always the fun part of yarn. Interesting finding the end of something, and I just found it. So here we go. Take a section of that. And we're going to wrap it around the shuttle. And there again, I'm not gonna try to put too much on that shuttle.
Is your shuttle just a popsicle stick with
Yes,
a V cut
just
out
cut.
on the end?
Yeah. It's one of the wider ones, and I took a heavy duty pair of scissors and just cut notches in it. So then I'll cut that off. That yarn aside. And we'll start. See, gonna go under this one. This one's a little harder to see because that yarn, that sparkly yarn, it's hard to tell where it went under and over. Now, I could pull some of this through and just start over just like I did here, but I think I'm gonna just go ahead and weave it in like it is. But I push it up against there. So you can see what happens with that sparkly yarn you can go back later when you finish and pull out some of those threads if you want to have it a little fluffier. And I'll go back over this. So you're basically going to do the same process with each of the yarns. As you weave, you will find that your weaving gets tighter and tighter just because, and more stable and easier to work with, just because you've got more rows in. Again, I'm going to pull that out a little bit so it doesn't get pinched in on the center. I'll do a couple more rows and then I'll show you how to finish off the ends. Any ends that you want to anyway. Some of those I could just leave loose. So this doesn't take a really, really long time. I mean, if you're working on a really big piece, it would take quite a bit. And if you've ever had the opportunity to watch somebody weaving on a big loom, you can see that they don't get real far in an hour or whatever. It's a pretty laborious process. But to do something small like this, it's a lot more manageable. And it makes it fun. So there we go, one more row done. And look how pretty those yarns look together. That's what's really kind of fun too, is just seeing how all the yarns. Now, if you push this up as you go along and you push this up fairly tight, you won't see the warp threads anymore. They'll just kind of disappear, except for on the where the ribbon is. But that's kind of what weaving is all about. I mean, generally you aren't going to see the warp threads unless you're doing a different type of weaving where you're like lifting two threads and going over two, under two, or over two and under one, over two, under one. So that's how patterns are created. And like, for example, if you're wearing jeans, I think that weaving, it's called a twill weave, and that's over two, under two, over two, under two, all the way along, and then reversed on the way back. So you can create all kinds of different textures just by how you do weavings. And when you're working on a very large loom, you've got a lot more threads to work with. So you probably wouldn't be able to do much of a twill weaving or some of those other textures on something this small because you just don't have that many warp threads. Plus, I have an odd number and some will require an even number. So I'm going to show you how you can take your tapestry needle here. And I've got this loose end right here. So what I'm going to do is just pull that thread around here like this, tighten it up, and that'll make it easier to push through. If I had any fingernails left on my, just broke them off, but it'll make it easier to pull that through. And then all you do to hide this is pull it down through those. And then you can also go up under this one. And you just kind of weave it in the same way you did the weaving part of it. And after you've done a few, after you've got it woven through a few of these, I could go all the way down, except for the fact that I put those ribbons in, and then it would show over that ribbon. So I don't want to do that. But after you've done a few, make sure your tension stays the same. I'll do one more just so I end up snipping it off at the top away from that fuzzy yarn, because I don't want to clip that all off. And just make sure that you've got your row snug a bit. I could have tightened that up a little bit. And then you just cut it off. You don't really have to tie it off or anything like that, because it's in the weave and it's not likely to work its way out. So there's your weaving. I would say you're going to want to go all the way through this. Now, if you want to, you could finish off this bottom part with fringes. And the easiest way to do that, if I can find the end of the yarn again, that's always a challenge. Here we go. So we're going to take, I'm just going to take a chunk of yarn. So I've got a piece of yarn. I'm going to fold it in half, line up the ends here, like that. And then I'm going to run that loop in between the warp threads. And then, let's see if you can, I could do this so you can see it. And I'm going to pull these other threads through that loop and pull it tight. So there you, that's a simple way to add a fringe on. And you just do that all the way across. If you don't like fringe, you don't have to put one on. That's just something that's added for added decoration for this. So I think that covers all of the weaving for today. So I hope you'll get a chance to do this. It is a little bit more involved than some of the other projects, but I think it's worth it once you get it finished. It's really kind of a neat, fun way to do it. So enjoy the project, and we'll see you next time. Oh, and I forgot, we have to thank our sponsors. Nebraska Arts Council, Nebraska Cultural Endowment, National Endowment for the Arts, and of course, the Scottsbluff Public Schools for bringing this project to you. Without their help, we would not be able to do this. So thank you to them. And we'll see you at the next project.